And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I'm your host, Demo, and this is Brewing with Underwhelming Commanders, episode 10. And before I get to the commanders this week, I just want to say, as I mentioned in a video a couple of weeks ago, I've sort of been noticing that a lot of the commanders are maybe not underwhelming, unpopular, but not underwhelming, right? We basically have two different kinds of commanders here. We have the ones that are really underwhelming that I think are difficult to build around, which is sort of what this series was intended for. But then we have a bunch of commanders that are just really unpopular and, for whatever reason, and I don't think are underwhelming at all. So for example, Gyrus was one of the ones that I did recently that I don't think that's an underwhelming commander at all. I think it's pretty darn good. And I've decided from now on, if I have an underwhelming commander, I'm just going to try to build a good deck with it. If I have a commander that I think is actually pretty good, just unpopular, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of do a more interesting take on it. Rather than just, I'm going to build the best deck I can with this commander, I'm going to do something interesting and unique and a little more off the cuff. So for example, with the Gyrus deck, I probably, if I was doing it again, would make an energy deck. There's lots of little creatures with a small power and toughness that when they enter the battlefield give you energy, when they attack give you energy. There's lots of those creatures. So I think that would be an interesting take on a Gyrus deck. So from now on, moving forward, underwhelming commanders, if I truly think they're underwhelming, I will give them the best go I can to make the best deck I can. But if I think they're actually pretty good commanders, just unpopular, then I will try to do something a little more niche with them. So starting out this week, number 3 is Szadek, Lord of Secrets, and I think this one definitely is an underwhelming commander. First of all, he costs 7, 3 blue, blue, black, black. Vampire 5/5 with flying. When Szadek, Lord of Secrets, would deal combat damage to a player, instead put that many +1/+1 counters on Zadek, and that player mills that many cards. So that ability I think needs a little bit of explanation. So right out of the gate, I'm going to attack with my Zadek. He's a 5/5. He's going to connect with my opponent, and he's got flying, so connecting with your opponents shouldn't be a big issue here. So that's one obstacle out of the way. When he connects, instead of dealing 5 damage, we're going to put 5 +1/+1 counters on our commander, and that player will mill 5 cards. Okay, so now our commander is a 10/10. So the next turn, we attack with our commander again, it connects, and now we're going to mill 10 cards and put 10 +1/+1 counters on our commander. So you can see this gets out of hand fast. And that's obviously why our commander costs 7 mana. So for me, the first thing I'm going to concentrate here, obviously we're in a mill strategy. You could put some of the typical milling cards in this deck if you want, like Traumatize, for example. Fraying Sanity is another really great one. If you're going to mill 10 or 20 cards off an opponent's library, when you attack with your Zadek, having them mill another 20 at the end step is going to be great. But I want to concentrate more on the attacking. We're attacking here, right? And doing that in a blue and black strategy isn't super typical. Silent Arbiter, I think, is going to be a great addition to this deck. No more than one creature can attack each combat. No more than one creature can block each combat. I think that's a fantastic fit. We're only going to be attacking with just our commander. This is sort of a Voltron strategy, and we don't really want a whole lot of other attacking going on. In fact, we're going to have very few creatures in this deck, I would imagine. We're not going to be attacking with any of them except for maybe Zadek. Consuming Aberration, I think, would also work here, of course. But other than that, I don't think we'd have a whole lot of creatures, and we don't want to be doing a whole lot of attacking. Like I talked about in my Commander Deck Doctor video, if I'm in a milling strategy, that's all I'm doing. I don't care about reducing my opponent's life to 0, because that's not how I'm planning on winning the game. I'm going to be attacking so that I can mill. Teferi's Veil is another fantastic card if you're going to be swinging with your commander and you don't want to be doing anything else with it. So 1 and a blue enchantment, whenever a creature you control attacks, it phases out at the end of combat. So now we can attack with our Zadek. He can mill those cards, get those counters, and then he'll phase out at the end of combat. So he's not sitting around getting easily removed, which of course is going to be a big issue with this deck. Lightning Greaves is going to go in this deck, going to protect our commander, going to allow it to attack right away. Swiftfoot Boots I would put in here as well. Got to make sure our commander isn't getting removed. I think Bubble Matrix, a card that I talked about in a recent 10 cards video, fits in this deck. All damage dealt through creatures is reduced to 0. Okay. We don't want to be dealing damage, right? And we don't want to be getting damage. So I think this is a good fit. Any of those board wipes that deal damage, our commander is now going to be immune to. Deathmatch, another card that I just mentioned in my 10 cards video, I think is another interesting fit in this deck. 3 and a black enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, that creature's controller controller may have target creature of their choice get -3/-3 until end of turn. So this doesn't hurt us, right? That's why I thought Deathmatch was a good include in a lot of decks, because if it doesn't hurt you, then it's going to hurt all of your other opponents. So our commander's a 5/5. Giving it -3/-3 isn't going to do anything. They would have to have 2 creatures enter the battlefield in order for it to kill our commander, and that's if he doesn't have any +1/+1 counters on him already. Once he starts putting +1/+1 counters on him, he's going to be completely out of reach of that Deathmatch. So I think that's an interesting include in the deck. We got to be bumping up our commander's power though, right? Because the amount of damage it deals is the amount of +1/+1 counters we're getting and the amount of cards we're milling. So a card like Hatred is going to be fantastic in this deck. 3 black instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, pay X life. Target creature gets +X/+0 until end of turn. So we're going to pay 5 mana, and then we're going to pay X life. So let's say we pay 10 life. Our commander becomes a 15/5, assuming it doesn't already have counters on it. And this is particularly important because, yes, we're going to connect and we're going to mill 15 cards. So we're milling more cards, but more importantly, we're putting 15 counters on our commander, right? This is a temporary boost, but it's going to turn into a permanent boost. So just by casting that Hatred for 10 life, we're going to give our Zadek 15 counters. So now he's already a 20/20. Endless Scream is also going to do something like this. Howl from Beyond is also going to do a similar effect. And Night Howler, I think, is going to be absolutely perfect here. 1 black enchantment creature, 0/0, has bestow 2 black. Night Howler and enchanted creature each get +X/+X for X the number of creature cards in all graveyards. So we're in a milling strategy. There's going to be lots of creature cards in all those graveyards. So I think this is a fantastic fit. We're going to obviously bestow this on our commander so that he's going to both mill more and become bigger faster. I think vigilance is important here, just like I talked about with Sisters of Stone Death. If we have a commander that we're going to be attacking with all the time, having a giant blocking flyer is also going to be good to keep us from getting attacked. So just like I put in that deck, Sword of Vengeance and Forebear's Blade, I think are both great in this deck. Also give that power boost, which is super important. Akroma's Memorial and Angel's Trumpet, I think also both good fits. Akroma's Memorial, I mean, it costs 7, but guess what? So does our commander. So that's not going to be an issue. I mean, the issue of we need lots of mana in order to make this deck work is going to be an issue you're going to have to deal with anyway. I mean, it just is what it is. Akroma's Memorial is going to give our commander vigilance, which is really important because we can attack with it, and now we have a giant flying blocker that we have up. It also has First Strike, Trample, Haste, protection from black, and protection from red, so that's pretty good. And Angel's Trumpet, I think, is a great fit because we're always going to be attacking with our commander, and we're probably not really going to have a whole lot of other creatures in this deck. So it's going to give our commander vigilance. We're going to be attacking with it anyway. It'll probably hurt our opponents, force them to attack each other, attack with creatures that they probably don't want to attack with. A very interesting card, Expanded Anatomy, I thought was actually a good fit in this deck. It's a colorless sorcery lesson, 3 mana, put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. It gains vigilance until end of turn. I actually think that fits. Both the counters and the vigilance fits in this theme. Gotta protect our commander though, that's important. Our commander is going to get up to like a 10/10, 20/20 really quickly, and of course it's going to be a target for everything. Luckily we're in blue. We do have the option of putting lots of counter spells in this deck. Stubborn Denial is one that you don't see in commander very often. Gets played in other formats, especially modern, a lot. 1 mana instant, counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1. However, it has Ferocious. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, counter that spell instead. So we're always going to have the Ferocious when our commander's in play. So this is just 1 mana to counter any non-creature spell. If anyone's seen this at work in Modern, they'll know it's a really powerful counter spell if you have that Ferocious. And Veilstone Amulet is another personal favorite of mine. You know, white and green are really, really good at protecting their creatures. The other colors, not so much. I really like Veilstone Amulet. 3 mana artifact. Whenever you cast a spell, creatures you control can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control this turn, right? So basically every time you cast any spell gives your creatures hexproof. So because we're in a black and blue deck, we're probably going to have a lot of instant speed spells in our deck. So what you're going to do is you're going to wait for that moment when your opponent is about to Path to Exile your Zadek, and then you Cyclonic Rift or use something in response. Then that's going to trigger your Veilstone Amulet, which will then give your commander hexproof. So I think that's a good inclusion in the deck as well. Like I said, it can be challenging mostly because you have that 7 mana commander. You know, that to me is the most challenging part of this commander. Once you get it down, you really, really want to keep it on the table. But once you get rolling, I think this commander will get out of hand fast. But coming in at number 2 this week, and this was a really close one this week, Jolrael, Empress of Beasts. 3 green, human spell shaper, 3/3. Has a very powerful ability to pay 2 and a green and tap. Discard 2 cards. All lands target player controls become 3/3 creatures until the end of turn. They're still lands. So, a couple very important things of note here. First of all lands target player controls, so we can do this on ourselves and we can do this on our opponents. And what makes Jolrael a really powerful commander is this is an instant speed ability, obviously. So your Jolrael can just sit there, and if someone casts a board wipe, I mean, basically no one's going to want to be casting a board wipe. Someone goes to Wrath and you can respond by paying 3 and discarding 2 cards and turning whatever player you don't like, turning all their lands into creatures, and now they just got their lands board wiped. That's going to be devastating. Basically, as long as your Jolrael remains untapped, your opponents just aren't going to want to cast board wipes. You know, that's why, of course, 1,000-Year Elixir is going to be a great fit in this deck. I haven't put this card in a deck in a while, so I guess I'm about due, right? We're going to be able to use Jolrael's ability right away, and also we can pay 1 and untap it to use it again if we need to. Again, it's going to be a threat for our opponents to have our Jolrael sitting there untapped all the time, so that, oh, better watch it, don't want to cast that Toxic Deluge, or maybe I'll turn all your lands into creatures and you'll lose all your lands. The discard 2 cards, though, that can be a little limiting, right? I mean, discarding 2 cards, that's not nothing. So we got to make sure our hand has lots of cards in it to be discarding. And of course, in green, that's not an issue. There's tons of ways to draw cards in green. Probably the best ways in this deck are Shamanic Revelation and Collective Unconsciousness, right? We're in more of a go wide strategy here than a go tall strategy. So we want stuff that's going to draw us for each creature we control. This way we can pay 3, discard 2 cards, turn all our lands into creatures. So now we have like 8 or 10 creatures, and we can draw all those cards with Shamanic Revelation or Collective Unconsciousness. So those are going to be great fits in the deck. I think probably overall we'll be turning our creatures into lands more. The win con in this deck, I think, is just we'd attack with all our lands. Obviously, we're going to be wanting to ramp lots, which green does fantastically. Landfall stuff, I think, is also going to fit in this deck. You can do a lot of that as well. Gotta have Earth Surge and Sylvan Advocate. Earth Surge is going to give our land creatures +2/+2. So now those 3/3s are going to be 5/5s when we turn our lands into creatures. And Sylvan Advocate as well. 2/3 with Vigilance, as long as you control 6 or more lands, which won't take that long. Sylvan Advocate and land creatures you control get +2/+2. So both of those are going to be fantastic fits. And Embodiment of Insight, I think, is going to be particularly good because it gives our land creatures vigilance, which is really important. If we're attacking with our lands all the time, then we can't be tapping them for mana, obviously. So Embodiment of Insight, 4 and a green elemental 4/4 with vigilance, and gives all our lands vigilance. So now we can attack with them after we've turned them into creatures, and then on our second main phase they're still untapped, so now we can tap them to cast stuff. Also has a landfall trigger there. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may have target land you control become a 3/3 elemental creature with haste until end of turn. So doing what we're already doing in this deck anyway, so it's definitely a great fit. Bear Umbra is another way to do this. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has, whenever this creature attacks, untap all lands you control. So as long as we have one creature that's attacking alongside, now all of our lands are going to untap, and on our second main phase, now we can cast a bunch of stuff. Sword of Feast of Famine and Nature's Will also work great that same way, where we deal damage with something and now we get to untap all of our lands, and on our second main phase, now we can actually cast stuff with them. Circle of Dreams Druid is another sort of way we can do this, where yes, we can attack with all our lands that are now creatures and they'll all be tapped, but Circle of Dreams Druid is going to tap to add green for each creature we control. So if we have 8 of our lands out that are creatures and we tap this on our second main phase, or even on our first main phase, I guess, we're going to add all that mana so then we can use that to cast it as well. Obviously, you can put Gaia's Cradle in this deck as well if you got one. It'll be a great fit. Kamal's Heart of Krosa is going to help us close out the game. He's got that at the beginning of combat on your turn. Creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn, right? Any overrun effect is going to work great in this deck. This one's free though, which is great, right? We don't want the mana intensive ones. This one is just, we're just going to get it at the beginning of combat. So we turn all of our creatures into 3/3s. Now they're going to be 6/6 tramplers. That's going to end the game pretty quick. He's also got that ability where you can pay 1 and a green and target land you control becomes a 1/1 elemental creature with vigilance, indestructible, and haste until end of turn. So that works as well. What you want to do is you want to turn your however many lands you can into those creatures with vigilance, indestructible, and haste, and then use your Jolrael's ability so that they then become 3/3s. Kamal's will also work the same way, so we can put that in the deck as well. And Eudora Grave Gardener is going to be a fantastic fit. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may return to the battlefield face down under its owner's control. It's forest land. So now any of our creatures that we turn into lands with Jolrael's ability or any other ability, we attack with them, they get killed, they get blocked, whatever the case may be. When they die, they're just going to flip over and be a land again. They're basically turning from a land into a land. So that's a fantastic fit. It's basically board wipe protection for our own lands, which is kind of funny. I think it's a very interesting fit in this deck. But moving on to our number 1 commander for this week. And like I said, it was a really close one. Yasharn Implacable Earth won by just a single vote. Doesn't get much closer than that. So Yasharn Implacable Earth is 2, a green, and a white elemental boar 4/4. When Yasharn Implacable Earth enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic forest card and a basic plains card. Reveal those cards, put them into your hand, then shuffle. Players can't pay life or sacrifice non-land permanents to cast spells or activated abilities. So when I first saw Yasharn, I really liked it. I liked what it was doing. First of all, it's doing 2 very different things that I like. I like when a commander is doing lots of different things because then there's lots of different ways you can go with it. Obviously, the players can't pay life or sacrifice non-land permanents to cast spells or activate abilities. That's the part I think that grabs people, and it really screams stacks, obviously. You really want to make a stacks deck with this, and I think that's what a lot of people have done. So that's not what I'm going to do. Like I said, I don't find this to be a particularly underwhelming commander. Zadek and Jolrael I thought were pretty underwhelming, so I just went pretty straightforward with them. Yasharn I don't find to be underwhelming. I think both of those abilities are pretty good, so I'm going to go a little more niche with this, I think. First things first, though, we got to make sure that we don't have any of those pay life or sacrifice effects. So a card like Sakura Tribe Elder that I would put in this deck, typically I would put in a green deck. Almost all my green decks have Sakura Tribe Elder. We're not going to put it in this one. You could, but why would you risk the chance that you won't be able to use it? Then it's just a 1/1 that does nothing. Fetch land, same thing. Windswept Heath, not going to go in this deck. Typically I probably would, but you can't activate it because it has that pay life. Don't really need it anyway, right? Our commander is going and getting lands, so I don't think not putting 1 fetch land in here is going to hurt us at all. So you just got to make sure when you're building this deck, for me, that second ability it's just going to help us because we're not going to put any pay life or sacrifice effects in here, and our opponents most likely will. Our opponents won't be able to crack their fetches. Our opponents won't be able to cast that Force of Will because, yes, you actually do have to pay life for that. So it's just going to hurt our opponents. It's going to be a one-sided effect where it's just not going to hurt us at all, and it's going to hurt our opponents, and it's going to benefit us. We're also going to throw Angel of Jubilation in this deck because it's a backup effect for our commander. 1 white, Angel 3/3, has flying. Other non-black creatures you control get +1/+1. Okay, great. That's all of our creatures because we don't have any black creatures. And it has that players can't pay life or sacrifice creatures to cast spells or activated abilities. So again, it's like a backup for our commander. I threw a couple of more stacksy, hate bears type effects in here like Aven Mind Sensor and Thalia, Heretic Cathar. Again, they're just great cards that you can put in any deck. They only hurt our opponents. They don't hurt us at all. But I didn't really go the stacks theme. I didn't think, first of all, I think that's what everyone's doing already, so I don't want to do the same thing. Also, I don't even know if that's the best way to go. I actually really like that first ability. Whenever our commander ETBs, you go get a forest and a plains. So why not do more of a blink strategy? And yes, I know people have done blink strategies quite a bit. I myself have, but have they done it with Yasharn? Maybe not. It's a more interesting blink strategy because you're not just blinking, you're filling your hand with lands. So we're going in that direction. Obviously, Conjurer's Closet and Teleportation Circle are going to be fantastic. They're going to be able to blink our commander on every end step so that we can then go get 2 more lands, put them in our hand. Ephemerate, obviously, there's tons of effects in white for blinking. There's going to be no problem filling this deck with stuff like that. Throw a few more ETB creatures in here like Cavalier Dawn as a personal favorite of mine, Reclamation Sage. Again, in green and white, you're going to have no problem finding lots of great ETB creatures to fill this deck with. But with our commander, when our commander ETBs, we're putting lands in our hands. So I'm thinking, sort of the land tax seismic assault idea I already had and already made a video about, where I'm filling my hand with lands that I can then use for other things. Basically our commander is sort of a land tax on a stick a little bit, where if we're blinking it, we're constantly putting lands in our hands. So I'm going to put Ayula's Influence in this deck. Green, green, green enchantment, discard a land card, create a 2/2 green bear creature token. So now we can use the lands that we're filling our hand with to do other things. Avenger on Doll and Devout Witness are two spell shapers I think that fit in this deck. Avenger on Doll, we can pay 2 and a white and tap, discard a card from our hand to exile target attacking creature. Its controller gains life equal to its toughness. Devout Witness, we can just pay 1 and a white and tap to discard a card and destroy target artifact or enchantment. So we basically can be doing that every turn, right? Every turn we're going to be putting 2 lands in our hand that we can then discard to either of these effects. Nostalgic Dreams is another fantastic one. Green, green sorcery, as an additional cost to cast Nostalgic Dreams, discard X cards from your hand. So we got a bunch of these land cards in our hand. We can discard them all and return X target cards from our graveyard to our hand and exile Nostalgic Dreams. I think that's a great fit in the deck. Once we have all these lands in our graveyard, now we can cast Planar Birth or Splendid Reclamation. Either one is going to get all those lands from our graveyard into play. Planar Birth only returns basic lands, but guess what? That's all I'm going to put in this deck. I really think because our commander is only getting forest and plains, we want as many of those as we can in the deck because we're going to be blinking our commander all the time. So I'm only going to put forest and plains in this deck. I don't think we need to put any non-basic lands in this deck at all. So for that reason, now we can also go the route of non-basic land hate. Centaur Vinecrasher also is going to work great here. It enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on equal to the number of lands in all graveyards. So we'll probably have a lot of lands in our graveyard, assuming we haven't cast that Planar Birth or Splendid Reclamation. And you know what? If we don't, we can always blink it later on. This is an ETB, so we can wait until there's more lands in our graveyard and then use our Conjurer's Closet or some other blink effect to blink our Centaur Vinecrasher, and then it will ETB with more counters on it if we have more lands in our graveyard. And whenever a land card is put into our graveyard from anywhere, we can pay a green and a green and return Centaur Vinecrasher from our graveyard to our hand. So that's going to be happening a lot as well. Also, though, we're just going to be filling our hand with stuff, I think, a lot. Again, I'm sort of in an off-color theme here, I thought, which would be a really interesting take on this commander of I'm in a discard theme in white and green. I'm also in a having a big hand size in white and green, which you don't see much. So Venser's Journal, Reliquary Tower, right? We're going to have a full hand, maybe even an over full hand. So having no maximum hand size is great. Venser's Journal is also going to gain us all that life. Ivory Tower is another one that at the beginning of your upkeep, you gain X life or X the number of cards in your hand -4. Intercom, 2 and a green, instant arcane. Target creature gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. So that can be 8 or 10 or who knows how much. Kayamaro, First to Stand, and Masamaro, First to Live. Cards like this is going to be how we probably will close out this game. Kayamaru's power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in our hand. If we have 4 or more cards in our hand, it gets vigilance. If we have 7 or more cards in our hand, when it deals damage, we gain 7 life. And Masamaro has power and toughness each equal to twice the number of cards in our hand. So he's going to be humongous. And obviously, we're not just filling our hand with lands from our Yasharn. As I said with Jolrael, green draws cards really, really well. So a Rishkar's Expertise, for example, you draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. So now if I have that Masamaro in play and it's a 15/15, now I draw 15 cards and my Masamaro is a 30/30. So filling our hand is not going to be an issue in this deck at all. I just think it's a really interesting strategy. I'm in a blink strategy. I'm in a lot of strategies here, really. I really ended up doing a lot of things in this deck where, yes, I'm blinking. Yes, I have a little bit of that hate thing on it. I mean, our commander has that stapled on it anyway. To me, it's just a bonus. I'm also filling my hand with lands. I'm discarding lands to get advantages out of them. I can return them from my graveyard to play with something like Planar Birth. I can take advantage of the lands in my graveyard with something like Centaur Vinecrasher. I can take advantage of the number of cards in my hand with something like Venser's Journal. So very interesting deck I think I put together here. I like it a lot. Give it a try if you want to. The deck list is in the description below, as always, for this one. And in the description below as well is the poll for the next Underwhelming Commanders video. I've done 10 of these already, and I'm just going to keep on rolling until probably I get through all of the Underwhelming Commanders or unpopular commanders that exist. So go vote on that poll, and we'll see which commanders I will be building decks for in the next Underwhelming Commanders video. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.